All right, welcome to Project One. Calling this Micro to Macro. This project is one that I like to throw at students to see really where they're at in their development. So this is a project where there's little technique that we're talking about and more about, okay, show me what you are can do or are comfortable doing. And with this, I would just give the sort of the precursor of really just trying it out. Like if you don't really know what you're doing with drawing, then really jump in and just see what happens on this piece. Any sort of hesitancy in your work, in your mental state, will begin to show, right? So sometimes you just have to go in there saying, I felt like doing this, and you just go with it. And if you start to build that confidence, you're going to find yourself growing as an artist very quickly, right? Confidence is the number one goal, because if you don't have confidence in your work, then you're not going to have confidence showing it. And we as a viewer are going to see work that doesn't have confidence. So it just kind of continues to snowball. So I'm going to give you that just to think about. Do not stress about any of this. I know it can be stressful, but really let's slide down your back, because on this project, we're just going to jump in. Now, the main concept is that, we need to experience and really get in touch with how we use lines, right? There are no lines in nature. We have to use lines in order to define nature, right? Everything in nature is real. It's three-dimensional, okay? It has length, width, and depth. But on paper, when we draw, right, we are using those lines to define the edge of a flower or a house or whatever it may be. But those lines really don't exist in nature. They are three-dimensional objects that sort of exist in three-dimensional space. So, that being said, using just line, how can we create a realistic experience for our viewer, right? So we are going to focus on realism using just line, and we are going to use that teamed with natural objects. Now, the reason why I like natural objects is, one, they're mundane, right? The idea that something can be so simple, but when we draw it, all of a sudden it can take on sort of a new look in a kind of more interesting way. And that will get you at the essence of what art can do. Art can elevate the things that are around it, right? Art can make something that is seemingly boring or mundane or everyday become extraordinary. Okay, so that there's that magic in that process that happens. So we're going to be using that, and we're just going to be applying some of these simple techniques that we've tried out within the first lecture in the drawing exercises and such. So the process is, I want you to get your 18 by 24 sheet of paper, and I want you to add 3-inch borders around that paper. Okay. I want you to select a natural object. It could be from your garden. I have some in the classroom on a still life shelf. I love like dried flowers, or antlers are great, pine cones. Um, if just you don't use anything man-made, right? Machine-made and stuff. We're looking for something that's more organic, that has a little bit free form, and there's a reason for that I'll explain in a moment. So I want you to use that. I want you to find a way to create a viewfinder, or in ways like you talk about a small index card. And what this allows us to do is, on that index card, you can use it as sort of like a way of sketching. I also have seen people cut out like a little window frame and use that to help crop and view. And I'll talk about more of this process later, but you probably need that. And then you're going to need your Sharpie and your felt tip pens. No pencils, no ballpoint pens. So what I'm saying here is that when we start drawing, we are drawing with the Sharpie, meaning we are jumping right into it. So I'd suggest if using the smallest pen that you have, or that felt tip pen, the smallest point. And we're just going to jump in and start doing the contours, right? We've learned from the 5 perceptions that we need to look at our contour lines first and get those contours built up in edges. And then from there, we're going to move on to the shapes, then the proportions, and then adding value, and then completing this thing as a whole. Okay, so that's the basic breakdown of this, and I'm going to give you a demo of it here in just a moment. If there are any questions, though, please email me. send it to me in a Moodle chat, something like that. We'll get back to you. All right, so since I'm doing this via computer for you, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to draw for you and stuff on screen, but I'm going to show you sort of how I go about prepping for this project. For any project, really the best thing to do is to give yourself several iterations and steps of trying these things out before you actually do them on a large piece of paper. That's where your sketchbook comes in handy. And you could count some of this stuff as sketches too. That's fine. But what you want to do, and you can see I have a photo taken on the right side. That photo just with my phone, so I set up which is dried sunflowers here, and I set that up. And then I wanted sort of as plain of a background as possible. I didn't want something busy to distract me. And I just snapped a photo of it, and you can then change that to black and white. You can change, take out all the saturation, whatever you want to do, really to dumb that down. I like taking a photo, not to draw from completely, but to give me a better mental image of what this can be. All right. So I always say, if you want something to look like a photo, draw from photos. But if you want something to look like life, then draw from life. So it's very important that I have this photo, but I also have the actual sunflower next to me, right? I'm actually looking at this, but when it comes to values and having something that I know won't move compositionally, I have this, okay? So compositionally, I'm looking at the photo, and I can see, and on this, I want you guys to create something that is touching a minimum of 3 sides, right? So I want it, in this case, I can touch the bottom, I can touch the left side, and a little bit of the top as well. So all of that, because if I touch the 3 sides compositionally, actually it works better. If you do something directly in the middle, then you're only going to really touch one side, and it can become stagnant. So on this project, I'm requiring you make the object touch 3 sides. This will also make it go bigger, right? So if you're drawing something that's fairly small, let's say just like a leaf, that means you're going to have to zoom in even more, which a camera can help you do that very well, as well. So it doesn't have to be the full object. It can be cropped in ways, like a leaf doesn't have to be fully on there. It can just be partial, but I want it to touch 3 sides of the paper, okay? Minimum of 3 sides of the paper. Now, once I've done that and I've had my resources, and I know what I want to do here, I've placed the object, as you can see, in a scenario where I know I want to draw it. Then I'm going to set up my paper. I know that I need to have 3-inch borders, so I quickly over here have my 18 by 24 piece of paper, and then I've added 3-inch borders to it. Now the reason why I have you guys add borders, and I'm going to have you add borders on most of your pieces this semester, is because it's a nice blank area that acts kind of like a mat, or of like a framing to the work, so we can get a sense of completion. It's also nice to have something to really compare our values to have something really nice and white. If you don't like white, I don't care if you change the border to all black or something, that's fine. But it's a really nice contrast. And 2, it means you don't have to draw as much. So there is a method of the madness there. Now, once I figured out what I want to do, and really don't take much time on this project is meant to be quick and really be a testament of what it is that you can do, then you're just going to take your pen and you're going to start drawing in, okay? Now, there's this sort of seriousness. Sometimes people take like, oh my gosh, it's pen, it's permanent. Well, yes and no, right? The best artists know how to hide their mistakes, okay? Plain and simply, that's just how I believe a good artist is defined. And through experience, of course, they should also be making less mistakes. But here, I do notice, the structure of the main stem and how it runs up. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here. Let me get this real quick. Get a nice pen nib size here. Right? Just so you can see it. Right? And I'm just going to make that gesture up, right? I'm focusing on contour lines here, okay? So then as I draw this, right, you don't see me even have to worry about continuing my marks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get sort of the main gesture. Now, no one's really going to know in the end how all this stuff looked, right? But I'm getting the basic movements that are going to happen, right? I have now that main stem. I can start to gesture out where those other three are. And over here, right, I see a little bit of that leaf. And I'm using which is called implied line. Right? Implied line means that sometimes the line isn't fully complete. And so it's that sort of incompleteness. But it still gives us the gesture of it, right? We don't have to give as much. In fact, less information, the better. Right? And you can slowly start to see these things being built out. Right? They're natural objects, so really we can do a lot with them. We don't have to be exactly what the picture shows. Change this. And this is what I love about natural objects is, just that organic nature of them. Okay. So if I'm focusing on my contour edges, we'll go ahead and do that. Like I said, use the smallest pen nib as possible. I used a bigger one here just so you could see it on the screen easier, but smallest one possible. And when they're thin on there, right, we'll be able to then go back over them with thicker ones to thicken them up, okay? Now, over here, I love the cast shadow, right? So zoom in there a little bit. I'm going to show you on this cast shadow. So I'm actually going to put that in mind. Which makes it actually touch a fourth side. Just for the sake of, just going to quickly sketch in that so we don't get too confused. And if I'm using those 5 perceptions, what I'm doing here is continually sort of adding in contour lines and then making them shapes. And if I look at it and say, well, that needs to be thinner, right? Hopefully then I've started with my smallest pen, so I can't go any thinner, right? Kind of X that out. But if it needs to go bigger, well, that's pretty easy to do. Right? And so I'm just going to continue sort of like working in building up basic shapes. And what you can see is that this shadow, when I take a shadow near at the edge of the, let's say the head of the sunflower, all of a sudden now that line begins to disappear. And we're going to talk about this throughout the entire semester, is how do we use lines to start, but how do we get rid of lines as we continue? Okay. So anyway, continue to build up that drawing. I know this is a basic intro, but I think you get the idea where you can use stippling, you can use cross-hatching, you can use, if I wanted to do the concrete, I suppose I could, and I can come back in here and start to add. That's completely up to you. But using only your pen, get that natural object touching 3 sides, okay? If there is any questions, please just shoot me an email, all right?